Hey, welcome to the channel. In this video, I'm going to teach you how to conduct a QRB in the Navy, also known as a ranking board in the Navy for E5, E6, or whatever pay grade that you need to do this ranking for. The same tenets are going to apply overall, and I'm showing you this method step by step because this is the most efficient way to rank sailors. So eval season comes along and you need to rank all of your sailors without taking up too much administrative time, but you still want to give all of the sailors credit for the work that they produce throughout the year. If you're in that spot, this video is for you. If that's not you, then you're going to learn how the eval system works and how we rank sailors. I'm going to break down the most efficient way to do a QRB in the Navy, and I'm going to leave timestamps below so you can skip to the part that you may need in a pinch. Easy day? If so, let's go. So step one, you got to figure out the size of the ranking group. This is going to impact the amount of work that you do yourself versus the amount of work that you put on your subordinate leaders to do. What I mean by that is if your group is 100 people, then some of the work you need to delegate out to the subordinate leaders to do. If your group is, let's say, 20 or less, then some of this work that you can do. This is how I recommend doing it. And this is how we rank things like Sailor of the Year, SOQ, even in the real world, how we see which sports arena is the best overall. Okay, so we assign different metrics to the arenas, for instance. So let's say we have a category for popcorn sales. We have a category for most sellouts in the year. We have a category for most attendance in the year. And we have a category for ticket prices. And we just combine all of these different metrics to see which arena is best. This is similar to how we do a Sailor of the Year, Sailor of the Quarter board. And so the arena that has the best popcorn sales may not necessarily be the arena that has the most sold out arenas in a year, because leading in popcorn sales doesn't mean that you're the best overall, but that overall package, let's say you're middle of the pack in popcorn sales and then you're middle of the pack in arena attendance, but you have the most sellouts, and then you have the most fans in attendance overall, and then you have the most revenue, you're probably going to be at the top of the list. Makes sense? So we figure out the metrics that we need to judge the sailors on, and these metrics are subjective to me, but this is going to apply to most of you in the Navy. So let's say we're ranking E5s. I would say rank them on mission first, and you assign a point value to each of these categories. So 50 points toward mission, 30 points toward leadership, 20 points toward training. By training, I mean training others, getting JQR assigned, getting JQS assigned. Category for warfare device, 15 points. Category for collateral duties, 15 points. Mess involvement, 15 points. Mess meaning, are you a part of the First Class Petty Officer Association, the Chief Petty Officer Mess? Are you a part of Junior Sailors Organization, JSO? Are you a part of CSAC, Coalition of Sailors Against Destructive Decisions? And then 10 points for awards, 5 points toward volunteer, 5 points toward education, and then 5 points towards the PFA. Let's talk about each of these categories because it's going to be a little bit different for each pay grade, whether you're officer or whether you're enlisted. These categories should be in your rankings because you should be doing all of these at each pay grade, but some things way more than the others. So once you become E6 and above, leadership matters more than mission. Not saying that mission doesn't matter, but you're more in charge of managing processes and leading people than you are on doing actual technical work or first line mission responsibilities or frontline workers. Now, remember, this is step one. So what you're going to do is you're going to compile all of these metrics into one Excel spreadsheet. Depending on the size of the group that you have, that's going to depend on how much work that you do, because all of these evals, they're going to come to you. So you can do the work yourself. I recommend doing the work yourself because you're a leader, you're in a leadership position, so we trust you. So we trust your decision making. All the evals come to you. You get to read all of them, read all of the brag sheets. Now you jot down the most important things that each sailor did in each of these categories. So mission responsibilities, for example, let's say you're a hospital corpsman. You would write just a few metrics in the block, not too big, but just something to let other people know what they did. I'll explain why I recommend doing it this way. But you're going to write administered 650 flu shots. Now, if they did something special worth a little bit more recognition, you'd put administered 650 flu shots, the most in Naval Region, Houston, Texas. Or it could be something like managed onboarding and indoctrination for 350 command sailors, something like that. All right, so just be smart about it. So that's mission. I will also say when you're thinking about ranking these, you may not use 50 points for mission for E5s. But if you're going off of a 50 grading scale, I would say 30 points, they did their job. They just did their job. They weren't anything special. If they're going a little bit above and beyond for their job, now we're thinking about 35 and 40. And if they are exceptional at their job, now we're thinking about that 45 mark. Now, 50 points, you got to be an absolute rock star, but you know who those people are. All right, so now we're moving over to leadership and what goes into leadership. So E5s, typically you're not going to be expected to hold too many leadership positions, but when you do, this is going to be more impactful because being a leader is hard. You are put in uncomfortable positions. You got to have some courage. I would define courage as doing something hard, even though you're really scared to do it. Okay, so that's what being a leader is like. Public speaking, all of these things are hard. Being responsible for others' careers and others' missions, these things are hard, so we have to reward the citizens that do that. And especially when it's not absolutely expected of you, you need to be rewarded for it. So that's why an E5 with leadership responsibilities is going to be rewarded more in this category. Now we're moving over to training. You should always be training your people, especially at the E5 level, because you're expected to be a subject matter expert. Now, what are you training them on? JQSs, JQRs, getting them warfare qual, things like that. Training on collateral duty, maybe some esprit de corps, training on different nav admins, maybe hold quarters and apply trainings to that. Just different things. You can literally apply training to most things. It's just going to be up to you to figure out how much weight you want to put toward training and the individual trainings that the sailors are doing. So I would encourage you to encourage your E5s to be conducting trainings. Next is going to be warfare devices. Now, I recommend having warfare devices pretty important on here because with a lot of commands, it's really important that you get your warfare device and that we reward the sailors that get their warfare device because it takes a lot of work to get your warfare device. A lot of long hours, sometimes some long nights, some long evenings, some early mornings. So a lot of studying. It takes time to earn it. Reward those that do. Now, if it's not expected of you, if you don't have to, which generally you do kind of have to, don't hold that too much against them. But if they got their warfare devices, it's an easy way to get full points. Collateral duties. So if you have 1 or 2 collateral duties, make sure you understand what level those collateral duties are. Division collateral, department collateral, command collateral. Way more points towards things that affect the CO or the Commodore. So when you're managing a program that the CO is responsible for, higher visibility, you should probably put more points toward that. Maybe less points toward division collaterals, a little bit more points toward department collaterals. And this depends on the pay grade. So E5s, we're not really expecting them to hold command collaterals. If they do, great. But you can't be as hard on them for holding the command collateral as you can on an E6 because they are supposed to be taking up those roles. Or in E7, they're supposed to be managing those command programs. Or in 03, 04, they're supposed to be managing these command programs. All right, then MES involvement, FCPOA, CPOA, CSAD, Coalition of Sailors Against Destructive Decisions, JSO, Junior Sailors Organization. Even if you don't hold officer titles in these, involvement of these should count. Now, if you hold officer positions and you've been doing something with it, then now you start thinking about giving these guys full points for these things. All right, so just do what makes sense, especially according to your command, because some commands don't have CSAD. So that's MES involvement. Now, if you're watching this and you're being ranked and you want to know how to best be ranked, now you understand that the visibility on MES involvement is pretty high. So you want to make sure that your name is at least out there, that you're getting involved in your MES organizations, because one of the things that they're judging you on is if you're not involved in a MES at those lower ranks or at your current rank, how can they expect you to be involved in the MES at higher ranks? Make sense? Now, awards. The reason why awards isn't that many points is because if you're a rockstar sailor already, it's going to already stand out in these mission and leadership and warfare and training qualifications and accomplishments. So we don't need to put too many points toward it, but this is the part where, everybody should be pretty good, almost on the same path with all these other categories. Now we're separating the average sailors from the superstars or the star sailors or the sailors that we need at the next pay grade. So just be smart about how much points you're putting toward awards. Volunteer, same thing. Just volunteer. All right. There's plenty of opportunities out there. Either find something in your community or find some command program that is sponsoring volunteer events. Volunteer is easy. If someone volunteers, just give them the points for it. Education, super easy. If you go after education such as college, things that are not required of your job role, but you take the time out in your personal time to do it anyway, you deserve points for it. So even if it's not college, maybe you got a certification. Maybe you took some Udemy courses. Maybe you took some courses on Coursera. All right, make sure you actually did them. But if it's like an NKO course that you're not required to do, but you did it anyway, or JKO course that you're not required to do, but you did it anyway, such as $1 Million Sailor, these are things that are going to go in the education category. Easy things to tick off, but this is where the most well-rounded sailors are going to stand out, because they're going to be able to get points in these volunteer and these education and these award categories. And in PFA, I think you should take points away for PFA failures and then give requisite points for passing your PFA. Now, how much points should you get for passing a PFA? Make a standard. All right. So let's say your standard is 3. You just passed, maybe you got a good 3. All right. And then now if you got an excellent 4 and if you got outstanding 5, it should be pretty simple, pretty easy. Now, if you failed, now I think you should take points away, because part of being in the Navy, we have to maintain mission readiness standards. And when you don't maintain those mission readiness standards and you fail your PFA, then you can lose your retention recommendation. So that's why I think points should be taken away. For sailors that go above and beyond, make sure they're rewarded. And for sailors that fail to meet the standards of physical fitness assessment, then they should lose points for that. So we combine all those categories into one Excel sheet, and we put the names of all the sailors on it, and we start ranking them. Now, how much of the ranking should you do as a person that's in charge of conducting the QRB? Depends on the size of the group. If it's 20 or less, you should do it yourself. You should put all these metrics on there yourself. This isn't grading yet. You're just putting all the metrics. So you get all the evals, all the packages, and then you go through the evals, you go through the block 43s, you go through the brag sheets, and then you put down the little bits of information. Shouldn't be that long. It's not like you're going to write a bunch of paragraphs. You're writing short, concise, someone can understand it, and then you put all of those in one sheet. Now, if you don't do this yourself, if you have 100 people or 60 people and you have to divvy this out to the subordinate leadership, then this is where your ability to lead will come into play, because now you're going to rely on them to give you accurate information on little tidbits of information. This is what I think. It's not really worth it for you to go through the whole eval. Yes, there is value in reading an entire eval because you start to see how evals should be written. But when it comes to these QRBs, I think they take too long. I think the training that can be gained from it is training that you can do with intent. So, for example, if your purpose of training your subordinate leaders into writing better evals is to keep kicking it back and forth, then that it takes a lot longer. Rather, let's sit everyone down and let's show them how to write out these lines on an eval. That's probably a better use of everyone's time and your time as well, because you can get people back to doing their mission rather than kicking back and forth. And the products that you then get are going to be better products as a result of your leadership and your ability to show your leaders and your sailors how to properly construct evals. So you're going to rely on the subordinate leaders to do the 10 or 15 people that they're in charge of, and then they're going to submit all of those to you. You compile it into one Excel sheet, and now every voting member, you send that big template to everyone. All right. So everyone gets that same sheet, and they use that one sheet instead of flipping through a bunch of evals, 50 different evals, 20 different evals, 30 different evals. Instead of flipping through all of those, now they use that one Excel sheet to grade, and they apply a grade to each sailor, and the grades from the voting members are the only ones that really matter. But it's still important to get those subordinate leaders to do this activity, even though their vote does not count overall, because they can now see where they need to improve, because they will have the final results, and then they can compare what they've done to what actually happens at the end of this. This is only part 1. So now we've got the grades back. All right. We sent out a template. Everyone submitted their grades. Now they submitted it to you. You compile it all. And now it looks like the arena rankings that we talked about in the very beginning of the video. The arena rankings, meaning the arena that's best at popcorn sales, isn't necessarily the best overall. The arena that has the highest gross profits and the highest employee retention is probably going to be somewhere up there, pretty high on the list. Is this method 100%? It can't be 100% because we're only at basically step 1. Okay, we're like step 1 and step 2. All right, so we got all the grades back. Now, when do we get in the room and we bicker and we argue over who sailor deserves what? Not yet. Reason being, no one else is needed at this point, because you need to use that Excel sheet. And now you need to take into account not just the overall score. Now you need to take into account how much time that the sailor has on board in that rate, any previous individual trait average that the sailor has, whether the sailor is attempting to separate or not, and whether that matters for your reporting senior's cumulative average. Now, what's risky, and why did I mention it with separating sailors? Sailors who are separating, they are getting out of the military. We do everything that we can to make sure that they have a nice transition into civilian life. But one thing that I would say is, if you're a reporting senior, you may have a decision to either award a lower individual trait average to someone that's separating. There's no use in giving them an individual trait average of a 4.29. But maybe that's just me, because what that does is that helps out those sailors that are staying in or who are rock stars, because that keeps the RSCA lower. And so when the RSCA is lower for the reporting senior, then it's easier for sailors who are well above the RSCA, their RSCA PMA, their RSCA performance mark average gets higher, and it makes it easier for them to advance. So this method, pretty much instituted in 2019, is an easier way for those standout sailors to advance. And that's kind of what we want. Some communities, sailors advance faster than others, and we should implement ways to encourage that, but also to maybe stifle it a little, because I think we're at the point where we're starting to see younger and younger E6s and E7s. That's a good thing, and that could be a bad thing, because at this point you can be a 23-year-old E6 and technically your brain isn't even fully developed, and you can be put in charge of a lot of people. Now, age doesn't necessarily make you a better leader, but time and service probably helps you to become a better leader. Just something to think about when we're thinking about RSCA and separating sailors. Lowering that RSCA to help the sailors that are staying in and who are performing well, that's just going to help them out at the end of the day. Your reporting senior may have different ways of giving welcome aboard Ps or welcome to your rank Ps to sailors. And if that welcome aboard P or welcome to your rank P is not indicative of average performance, just make sure that it comes out in that block 43. Make sure that it's annotated in that block 43 somewhere. Something like would be a ranked MP, etc., etc. So now it's your job to rack and stack these, because this shouldn't take too long. You understand how long people have been on board. You have all the evals. You have all of the information. You understand how long people have been on board. You understand whose eval this is their first of at that rank, or the first of at that command, or how long that they've been in that rank at that command, because that matters as well. A 4-month regular eval, you're probably not looking at an EP. Sorry to break the news to you, but that's probably going to be the case. You're not getting an EP for a 4-month eval. Even a 5-month eval, you're probably not getting an EP. So now, based on what you know about the reporting senior, you can rack and stack it. And what this does is it puts the onus on the person with either the most experience or who is most qualified to lead to go ahead and rack and stack these. It shouldn't take too long with that information required, but now you can rack and stack it. And now when you call the QRB, now that everything has been done remotely, you can pretty much do this QRB from across the country and then have a teleconference or a VTC or a Zoom call at the end of this, or get everyone into one room and then project the entire Excel sheet and show the original Excel document that has all the point values of everyone racked, and then who got EPs, who got MPs, and then who got Ps based on that. And then the new sheet that has the rack and stack based on time and rank, time at command, whether the sailor is separating or not, PFA failures. You take all that into account and you do the rack and stack yourself. And now you bring it in front of the voting members and they can determine whether you did it right or not. Because now they may see, wait, Sailor A, who I know a little bit more about, they do way more than Sailor B, and you have Sailor B ranked above them. And now we can kind of converse about it. Overall, this is probably going to be right. The bickering starts now, but you're not going to bicker for too long. This should be a 30 minutes or less meeting. And is that enough time to train people and everything? Well, if you've done this right, what's happened is everybody who's been a part of this process has gone through and judged 20 packages, 30 packages, 40 packages. So they understand the metrics that go into creating constructive evaluations. And now they can see how the rack and stack is. So this is training. This counts as you leading people, but you didn't lead them and make everyone grade evals in a noisy room, flipping through papers. You didn't do that. You put all the metrics in one Excel document and then had them grade. Each person uses their own grading metric. Use the same metrics, but use your own grading format, whether you want to apply 50-point submission or 40-point submission. It's just keep it consistent across the board for that individual grader. The total should break out who's supposed to be in what positions or not. Now you got to figure out, according to the BUPERS instruction, how many EPs you can give out, how many MPs you can give out, how many Ps you can give out. So this is a pretty easy calculation. I'll leave something in the description so you can figure this out. But typically for E5s and E6s, it's going to be a 60% split that you can give EPs and MPs to. At an E7, it's going to be 50%. EPs and MPs. Officers, O3s, you're going to be 60%. All right. There's no limit for E4s, E3s. It doesn't matter. Out of those EPs and MPs that you can give, you have a certain percentage that you can give EPs. So that's 20% EPs. A group of 20, that's going to be 4 EPs. Now you take that 4 EPs. Now the calculation that you should have done previously is figure out what 60% of that 20 is. So 60% of that 20 is going to be 12. So now we know that we can have 12 minus 4 MPs because that's going to be 60% split between EPs and MPs. So you get 8 MPs. And now the rest are going to be Ps. 8 Ps because 20 minus 12 equals 8. It's just the way the math works out. And then for E7s and O3s, it's going to be the same. It's just different numbers. But for the most part, that E5, E6, 20% EPs, 60% EPs and MPs, and then the rest Ps. So you figure out how that broke out according to the BUPERS instruction, the BUPERS manual. Now, if you need to train sailors on how to calculate their RSCA PMA, pretty easy to train them on. Just sit them down, get all their evals out, and you use all their evals in that pay grade. And then you subtract the RSCA from their individual trade average, and then that correlates to the amount of points above a 4.0 or the amount of points above a 3.8 if they're an EP or an MP or a P. So that's how that works. So the Bickering. Now the Bickering, the reason why I'm assuming that the Bickering isn't going to be that much is because this whole process is designed to go based on the numbers, based on the metrics. That's what our evals are based on. When you look at evals, you're looking for the numbers. All right. You got to track, make sure you're tracking your numbers, make sure you're keeping your brag sheet, make sure you're keeping a running brag sheet and you're tracking your numbers because that's what's important. That's what's going to stand out. So we use some numbers to figure out the ranking, and now we can mix and match based on what the reporting senior's requirements are for separating sailors or new accessions or on board less than 6 months or in rank less than 6 months, things like that. So you'll know that and you'll rack and stack accordingly. And then we'll know people who've got failures on PFAs, you get a P, things like that. And now you got to figure out what the RSCA was for the reporting senior. So I can use that average formula in Excel, and you can put all of those individual trait averages that you've now racked and stacked because you've used the individual trait average to rack and stack them. You can use the average of those to compare it to the average for your reporting senior currently. And you should want to be on par, probably below. Actually, I recommend below because it helps out those superstar sailors. It helps them get advanced quicker when the RSCA is lower because your RSCA PMA is based on how much over the RSCA you are. And so now we've dwindled down a process that takes hours and hours and hours or days to do into maybe like 30 minutes of FaceTime or an hour or two of work from each individual to grade, even less if there are less people. If there are not 50 people in that reporting group, maybe less. If there are only 20 people in that reporting group, you've now saved a bunch of time and you still train people in the manner that they can train effectively, but you can also train them outside of a QRB so that they're ready for the next QRB. I hope this helps you conduct your QRB. Let me know if this helps. Let me know if I missed anything. I'll be coming out with more videos like this. Stay tuned. Make sure you like the video to trick the YouTube algorithm to thinking that this is a good video. And I forgot to mention, mission first, sailors always.